Most people believe Alcatraz was the most brutal prison in modern history. A cold island surrounded by sharks. Escape was nearly impossible. But Alcatraz was not the worst. Thousands of miles away, off the coast of South America, there was a prison so cruel that even hardened criminals begged for death. It was a place where disease spread faster than hope, where escape meant certain death in the jungle, and where over half the prisoners never made it home alive. For nearly a century, this prison operated in near silence. Its name was Devil's Island, and its story is darker than most history books are willing to admit. Devil's Island was part of a larger penal colony established by France in 1852, located off the coast of French Guiana. The colony was designed for one purpose: to remove undesirable men from society permanently. Unlike Alcatraz, which mainly held America's most notorious criminals, Devil's Island housed thousands of prisoners, many convicted of minor crimes. Some were political prisoners, some were simply poor. Once sent there, return was almost impossible. The French government believed distance would solve crime. Instead, it created one of the harshest prison systems in history. Between 1852 and 1953, more than 80,000 men were sent to the colony. A shocking number would never leave alive. The island itself was small, rocky, and surrounded by violent currents, but the real danger wasn't the ocean. It was the climate. The heat was relentless. Mosquitoes carried malaria and yellow fever. Food was scarce and often rotten. Medical care was minimal. Prisoners were forced into exhausting labor under the tropical sun. Chains were common. Beatings were frequent. Solitary confinement could last months in dark, airless cells. Disease spread quickly in overcrowded barracks. For many inmates, survival depended not on strength but on luck. Physical suffering was only part of the punishment. The psychological toll was devastating. Prisoners knew their sentences didn't truly end. Even after completing their time, many were required to remain in French Guiana for an equal number of years. Some were forced to stay for life. Escape attempts were frequent but almost always fatal. The surrounding jungle was dense and unforgiving. Wild animals, starvation, and hostile terrain killed most who tried. The message was clear. Once you arrived, you belonged to the island. Hope slowly disappeared. And without hope, many prisoners simply stopped trying to survive. One of the most famous prisoners was Captain Alfred Dreyfus. In 1895, Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason in a scandal that divided France. He was sent to Devil's Island in isolation. His imprisonment drew international attention and exposed corruption within the French military. But while Dreyfus eventually proved his innocence, thousands of others were forgotten. There were no headlines for them. New public outraged Josiah suffering in a remote colony far from Europe. The world knew the island existed. Few truly understood what was happening there. Mortality rates were staggering. Some estimates suggest that up to 75% of prisoners died from disease, violence, or exhaustion. Guards often turned a blind eye to abuse. Supplies were limited. Clean water was rare. Punishments were extreme. A minor infraction could result in weeks of isolation. Some inmates were locked in tiny cages, barely large enough to stand. Others were shackled for years. The prison wasn't designed for rehabilitation. It was designed for disappearance. By the mid-20th century, reports of brutality began to surface internationally. Journalists described horrifying conditions. Public opinion shifted. In 1953, after more than 100 years, the penal colony was finally closed. Survivors were transported back to France, but many were too sick or traumatized to rebuild their lives. The island itself was left behind, its buildings slowly decaying in the tropical heat. Nature began reclaiming what remained, but history does not disappear as easily as concrete. Alcatraz became a symbol of American toughness. Devil's Island became something else entirely. It became a reminder of how far governments will go in the name of punishment. Thousands were sent there. Most were forgotten, not because their stories didn't matter, but because remembering them was uncomfortable. History often celebrates victories and leaders, but the darkest chapters are buried the deepest. At Buried Timelines, we uncover those hidden chapters, because sometimes the places meant to erase people end up revealing the truth instead.